expired. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. It's my pleasure to rise to speak on this MPI because it is indeed a matter of public importance, the issue of jobs for both mature age workers and young people all around this country. But I do just want to make a couple of remarks up front about the attitude of senators opposite that Senator Lyons has just highlighted, the reluctance to address the issues that cause displacement and unemployment for so many people. She's just accused the coalition of having no understanding and no empathy. How about Mr Martin Ferguson? Mr Martin Ferguson, one of the heroes of the Labor Party and the union movement in Australia, and he goes on to say about penalty rates on a Sunday, and I quote, "It's wrong to say that people absolutely depend on these penalties because the way we're going, they, the workers, might have the penalties in the award, but they mightn't have a job because industry can no longer operate under the existing framework." End quote. So how can the Labor Party sit there and make comments that close down any discussion about changing the issues that are actually causing the unemployment, when the heroes of their own side of politics have recognised that some of those fundamental conditions need to change if we are to see young people and more mature workers into work. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the unemployment rate. Again, Senator Lyons has talked about this going up to 6.3%. Statistics are wonderful things, but they can also be misleading. Now, the ABC is generally no friend of the coalition, but I note on the ABC's website, Michael Jander, the business reporter, talks about the fact that the reason, I quote here, "the reason why unemployment jumped despite the much better than expected jobs growth is that the participation rate soared," his words, soared 0.3 percentage points to 65.1%. And so because unemployment data is all about the population you're measuring and your comparison, you can get quite misleading figures. So I just want to make the point for those who are saying this is outrageous, it's a 2% jump, that there are some underlying factors about things like participation rate that despite, in the ABC's words, much better than expected jobs growth, we see that rise in the figure. Now, that is not to decry the importance of unemployment for those people who are affected by it. And the coalition is quite seized by that fact, which is why we are taking a number of measures to make sure that this government creates the environment where jobs are created. Let's go to one of the commitments of the Prime Minister at the election. He said he wanted to be the infrastructure Prime Minister. Well, in South Australia, we've seen this government commit $428 million to the North-South corridor, creating, for the Torrens Road to Torrens River part of that project, some 480 jobs per year during the construction phase. The Darlington Interchange, some 370 jobs during the construction phase. In the defence space, members opposite are saying this is all dreadful, we're presiding over this high unemployment, but what they're not acknowledging is that when they were in government, the funding, the $16 billion they cut out of the defence budget, which in my state is one of the largest industry sectors, resulted in a 10% contraction, of the workforce in defence industry. This government, in contrast, is boosting funding. We brought forward funding to start addressing some of the remedial issues for catching up on defence bases and equipment that needed remedial work, and we have brought forward announcements just this last week about future shipbuilding, not only bringing particular projects forward like the Future Pacific Patrol Boat, Future Frigate, the offshore patrol vessel. This $89 billion investment is going to keep some 2,500 sustainable jobs into the future. So let's look at mining. South Australia has great potential for minerals. We are hoping that the Olympic Dam expansion would provide great benefit to South Australia, literally thousands upon thousands of jobs. But why didn't that happen? Why didn't that go ahead? Well, the environmental impact statement was lodged in May 2009. The decision didn't come back until October of 2011, in which time a number of things like commodities prices had changed. In 2012, BHP decided to defer that whole project and seek a cheaper way of extracting the copper. Well, what else happened in 2012? Well, in 2012, was the commencement of the carbon tax, put in place by the Labor government. Now, Olympic Dam Mine is the largest consumer of electricity in South Australia. It's the second highest cost of extracting copper in a copper mine. So the carbon tax, which was brought in starting in 2012 at $23 a tonne, was forecast by Labor's own figures to go up to $350 a tonne by 2050, which is right in the productive part of that mine's life. Is it any wonder that BHP decided they would not go ahead with the plan and seek a cheaper option, because the policies that the Labor government put in place and are still seeking, as we see at their national conference, to bring back in are job-destroying policies. So what's this government doing? Well, we have got rid of the carbon tax, and we are committed to having a low-cost, low-impact way of abating carbon. Importantly, we're also about getting rid of the duplication in things like environmental approvals so that we can see projects up and running more quickly, which means greater investment and greater job opportunities. To July this year, there have been, under this government, 173 final approvals, which represents nearly $1 trillion worth of major projects that will occur in Australia, which means huge numbers of jobs. We're also looking at things like the Next Generation Manufacturing Investment Program. Again, in my state of South Australia, this is part of the $155 million of the growth fund that the federal government's committed to helping people adjust from the auto sector, which, as Mike Devereaux, head of GM, and GM themselves said, was nothing to do with Australian government policy. It was a decision out of Detroit that they were going to close down the Australian operations. But our response has been to find those companies that are innovative in their manufacturing methods, who have the potential to capture export markets and to help them grow their capacity. And so we've seen people like Sealy International, Arns Engineering, Levitt Engineering, Sealy, who are innovative in terms of air conditioning technology and now export around the world. Arns, large agricultural and commercial building construction. Levitt, who produce high-technology advanced manufacturing parts for the Joint Strike Fighter engine, supporting those people to create hundreds of sustainable jobs in South Australia. Free trade agreements. This government has signed up free trade agreements with Japan, Korea and now China. Now, those free trade agreements are going to bring huge numbers of jobs and opportunity, and yet again the Labor Party is opposing the China Free Trade Agreement, which stands to benefit thousands of Australians in terms of work. So this government is creating the environment whereby we can see people invest in this country, see export opportunities and create jobs, and the sticking point is those opposite. So for them to come in here and have an MPI that says that this government is presiding over high unemployment, when we see that it's partly the way statistics are measured, but significantly we are repairing the damage that has been caused by the ALP in the past and that they continue to inflict through things like their opposition to the China Free Trade Agreement, that they plan to inflict in the future with their plans to reimpose the kind of $209 per tonne cost on carbon, which is going to impact on jobs. And again, even their own heroes, people like Martin Ferguson and Mr Acting Deputy President, I realise you've written about this recently, as we look at the Productivity Commission report, the factors that affect the ability of Australian companies to employ people, rather than have a sensible, mature discussion about it. The first thing that the Labor Party and the unions want to do is to have a fear campaign and shut down discussion. But again, as Mr Ferguson said, to dismiss the report out of hand would only be to the detriment of workers. Well, if we want more people in work, I would call on the members opposite to listen to people who are heroes in their own organisation, like Mr Martin Ferguson, so we can have the discussion to continue the reforms, to continue the measures, whether it's productivity reforms, infrastructure investment, refining environmental approvals, getting rid of carbon taxes, or things like free trade agreements. The coalition is about creating the environment and the capacity of Australians to invest and to employ, which creates jobs for future generations.
Thank you.